I think there's a lot of studies out there that talk about the importance of pre-K, and we're seeing across the country a lot of great results coming from that. I think right now we're kind of bound by this K-12 mandate from the state. We're given money allotted for K-12 programs, and so as we develop a program for pre-K, we're kind of sliding money out of that K-12 piece in order to establish a better footing for our kids in our kindergarten. And honestly, like I saw this with my teachers all the time who were teaching kindergarten. They would give the pre-KP, they called it, and their kids didn't know their colors, they couldn't identify their alphabet, they could barely count, they couldn't spell their name. And those are things that we absolutely want to avoid, because if the achievement gap is starting before kids even get there, we have a lot of extra work to do even in kindergarten. So I'm absolutely supportive of pre-K. I think we have to figure out how to ensure, like if we know that pre-K yields the results with kids, then we need to make sure that we're funding pre-K appropriately. And then we need to, but what that requires then is it means that we have to look at everything else to say like what isn't as effective as pre-K and shift the funds from that to pre-K. Does that make sense? So like we have to ensure that the money that we're spending, because we have a finite supply clearly, we have to ensure that the money that we're spending is being spent on what's best for kids. When I was on the board of directors over at the community charter school, we had the same budget crisis coming up in 2006, 2007. And we sat down, and the treasurer, not an educator, he was like, hey, let's just cut everything across, 5%, we'll be okay. And I'm like, time out. I sat down with the principal and the educators and teachers in the building. I said, really, what are your priorities? What do you know is going to work best for kids what are your goals? And they said, we really wanted to boost our math scores because we saw the math scores really sank the previous year on the EOGs. And I said, well, what do you need to do that? They said, we need better math computer programs, we need more math workbooks, we needed more professional development time for teachers. So when we did our budgeting process, I said, we're going to pretend like this is our household budget. Take everything off the table. We're going to put these 3 teacher and educator priorities on the table first, and then let's start adding everything else in. It made sense to everybody sitting around the board because guess what? We all have a household budget. Well, at least we try to have a household budget, right? So we pulled it all together. By the end of the day, we put all the salaries and all the benefits back on. We put some of the, got to keep the lights on. And at the end of the day, but there were some things we had to cut. We couldn't, recarpet the entire basement anymore. We had to actually go out and get parents to donate all the curtains that were old and kind of falling apart. And so we knew we had some cuts to make, and those were difficult choices because people had been promised a lot of those things. But at the end of the year, we had a 20% increase in our math scores and a budget surplus. All because we were putting money on what was best for kids. And I think if we identify pre-K as one of those things that we absolutely have to fund first, then we have to fund it first. And we have to let other things become secondary and other things become tertiary. Because until we prioritize what's going to be best for kids, we're not going to be spending our money on what's best for kids.
Could I follow up with this? There's sort of 2 ifs that you had in there that I would like a little clarification. You said if we decide or find that pre-K is successful, and so the first part of this question is I want to know from your point of view, do we have the evidence that it is successful or not, or are you at the point that you think that is one of the critical things that needs to be funded? So your answer is yes to that.
I believe that nationally we've seen the real data. I think there was some confusion and maybe some disinformation and misinformation about the effectiveness in Charlotte. And when we were able to look at longitudinal studies of kids in Charlotte, people were able to poke holes a lot in the data. And so what I think we really need to do as a community is to come back together and say, hey, look, let's get rid of all the misinformation. Let's really show the results that we did have in Charlotte, prove to folks and get the community support and buy-in behind the pre-K in the way that we need to, and then be able to convince folks that we need to spend our money that way.
And then this is just very quick, and if you're not going to answer it, that's okay. But you're saying rather than going to the state and trying to get more funds, you're saying reallocate what we have. Pre-K is very expensive, so you must have something in mind that you do away with to make that happen.
The question is,
what would you, if the answer is not getting more money from the state, then what would you reallocate to, what funds would you reallocate as you've looked at Charlotte-Mecklenburg budget? Where would you think you might go to take funds to reallocate to be able to fully fund pre-K?
I mean, that's a big question. I think as I've looked across the board at a lot of the funds, there's a couple of examples, right? We spend a lot of money on curricular materials that we don't adequately professionally develop our teachers for or support them through, or to purchase, whole hog. We a lot of times purchase a portion of a program implement it sort of halfway, and then teachers are left saying, where's the rest of the resources, where's the rest of professional development? And so we kind of minimize the effects of these curricula. So what I would say, like, that's one example of us not getting the desired effectiveness from a resource that we're purchasing, right? But I think there's a longer list of that, because if we really go line by line through the CMS budget to really say, you know, what we're spending our money on and what we can save our money on. I mean, for example, there was the new punch-in procedure, right? I mean, it was $2 million, right? And those are small things, but those small things start to add up, you know? And if we can't say, hey, look, we need to actually fund some of these more expensive programs at the expense of not having maybe the newest toy at the moment, we have to be able to make some of those harder decisions and really understand. School board members really need to understand where every single dollar in that budget is going, because they're signing off on that budget. And that budget is a reflection of our priorities and goals as a community. And if we don't understand that budget, then we're not living up to our stewardship of those funds appropriately.